Jason Momoa, misnamed by some, but to the world the same untamed heartbeat of Hollywood. The towering figure who dragged myth out of the deep and wrapped it in flesh and breath. He is the force who gave a kingdom underwater a face, who once strode across the blood-red sands of Game of Thrones as Khal Drogo and made millions forget where fiction ended and reality began. He was once just a boy who carried the echo of Hawaiian surf inside his chest, and now he walks across red carpets with that same salt in his veins, a man who refused to let fate decide his story. Kay has worn crowns, led armies, and held entire worlds on his back. Inside that giant frame lives a soul woven from tide, ancestry, and stubborn will, a living emblem of freedom, of refusal to bow, of a life so fiercely lit that it seems impossible to imagine it dimming. Yet, every fierce light casts a shadow. Behind the roar of applause lies the quiet ache of a childhood torn in two, a brutal night that almost took the sight from one eye, and a home split apart by distance, celebrity, and the slow drift of time. To the public, he has long appeared as the invincible warrior. To many, his story with Lisa Bonet felt like proof that destiny is real. To his children, he was the man who tried to build a universe of love around them. And when that universe cracked, the world saw it. Saw the man they believed unbreakable walking through the wreckage of his own heart. For the first time, the ocean inside him did not shimmer with light. It crashed, wild and merciless, against its own shores. Today, at 46, the tempests he faces feel heavier, closer, and more complex than ever. If his gentleness, his humor, or his courage has ever reached you from a screen or a photograph, you know this truth. He showed us that even the mightiest heroes bleed. But he also taught us that the ones who inspire us most are those who stand back up, scarred and still moving forward. Comment 46 or write a message of love for Jason Momoa to honor them. It is a harsh lesson when a child discovers that silence can hurt more than any word. Death for Jason. That silence began on an island that seemed at first like paradise. Honolulu, a place where the sky leans close to the sea, where horizon and water blur, where a boy might believe the ocean is just another member of the family. Life gave him that sea, then took away the man who should have taught him how to walk beside it. He arrived in this world on August 1st, 1979, under Hawaiian skies painted in molten gold. His baby name, Namika, carried the spirit of waves, the memory of water, etched into syllables. Pacific scored the soundtrack of his first night's wind pressing against windows, waves colliding with volcanic rock, a lullaby of power. At his side were two souls who saw art everywhere. Cuppers. His father, Joseph Momoa, a native Hawaiian artist, believed that color and line could hold the spirit of a place, that a brush could trap the pulse of an island on canvas. His mother, Connie, a photographer of German, Irish, and Native American ancestry, used a lens to capture light slipping across faces, the quiet beauty tucked into stillness. Two wanderers, two dreamers, in love with brightness and with the broken places beneath it. But some stories fracture before a child can even learn the language to name what is missing. Before Jason was old enough to cement memories of his father's laughter, of his hand fitting into a larger one, the tide of adult choices pulled his family apart. The boy who had fallen asleep to the hiss of foam on rock was suddenly carried inland far, far inland, to Norwalk, Iowa, a landlocked world where the sea existed only in maps and memory. Koi there, in place of rolling surf, endless cornfields stretched under cold skies, snow replaced warm sand, biting into his fingers, shocking his lungs. The horizon still ran on forever, but to him, endless meant emptiness. The air tasted of soil instead of salt. When he stepped outside, there was no low roar of water, only the hum of distant highways and the rustle of stalks in prairie wind. He missed things he barely remembered: the weight of his father's palm, sting of sea spray, the way the ocean had rocked him to sleep. In the quiet Midwestern streets, he sometimes walked alone, watching other children shout and chase each other, their breath puffing small clouds into frigid air. He felt like a ghost moving among them, unseen, as if whatever wind guided other kids around playgrounds had turned its back on him. His mother, steady and tender, did what she could. She worked. She comforted. She tried to teach him to meet the world with kindness instead of anger. She told him about courage, about compassion, about staying open even when life closed its fists. But there are holes that no story can patch. The absence of a father became a weight in his chest, shape of emptiness he could never quite define, only feel as seasons changed. Watched friendships drift away like dried leaves lifted on currents of circumstance. Small losses stacked on top of the larger one he had carried from Hawaii. A friend moving to another town, another suddenly choosing a different crowd. 4 other kids. These were mere childhood shifts. The blow. For him, each departure confirmed a quiet fear that everything he loved eventually left. Tears later, when audiences believed his warriors were just characters, he knew better. Each soldier he played, each king, each rebel, carried that boy from Iowa inside, the one who had lost his shoreline and spent every day trying to find his way back. Comment 46, or write a message of love for Jason Momoa to honor them. Still, even surrounded by cornfields and snowdrifts, nature refused to abandon him. If he couldn't reach cliffs over the Pacific, he climbed tall trees instead, clinging to trunks and branches as if they were sea-worn rocks. The ground below transformed in his imagination into foaming surf. He ran headlong into thunderstorms, rain needling his skin, lightning carving veins of light in the sky, and swollen creeks and frozen banks of snow. He found smaller versions of the chaos and power he had once known at the water's edge. The wild became his church. Fields became open arenas where he tested his limits. Snow may have blanketed the ground, but it could not smother the blaze that had started in him on that island at birth. Every sunrise he chased was a protest against loneliness, a quiet refusal. He threw himself into movement, running, climbing, playing anything that turned ache into action. On sleepless nights he would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to rebuild his father from scraps of memory and imagination. A laugh, a silhouette, the story of an artist who lived close to the ocean. He would picture the shore where he'd been born, and wonder if the waves there still spoke his name without him. That longing became more than a feeling. It became direction. When he didn't know what to do, He imagined which path led him closer to the sea, even in metaphor, and followed that. School, with its rigid walls and strict rules, struggled to contain him. Teachers saw a restless kid, full of energy that didn't fit neatly into desks and chalkboards. Inside, Jason felt like there was a storm inside a bottle, rattling against the glass. Tried to channel its port's art mischief. Sometimes the line between them blurred. After high school, when others looked for stability, he looked for that lost heartbeat of water. He chose marine biology, not out of some cold strategic plan for a career, but because the subject itself was the thing he missed most. The sea, its creatures, its pulse. Sitting in classrooms, reading about currents and coral reefs, he tried to bridge the vast gap between where he was and where his soul felt at home. But his spirit was not made to live entirely in paragraphs and diagrams. Restlessness gnawed at him. The world outside called louder than any lecture hall. He drifted to Paris, exchanging textbooks for paints and canvases. There he learned to catch not just the shape of a face, but the emotion behind a gaze, the ache tucked into a half-smile, the ghost of a memory hovering in the slant of a shoulder. Then, to Tibet, high in a different kind of silence, where snow-capped peaks and monasteries offered a stillness he had never known. Among monks and thin mountain air, he tried to listen for a quieter rhythm beneath the roar that had always pushed him forward. Each place, each journey, was like picking up another piece of a broken mirror and slowly seeing a fuller reflection of himself. Yet no foreign street, no distant chapel, ever completely drowned out the call of where he began. Before he could close the final chapter on his studies, he did something many would call reckless. He walked away, not from responsibility, but from a life that did not smell like salt or feel like home. He turned his face back toward Hawaii. Comment 46 or write a message of love for Jason Momoa, to honor them. Music. When he stepped once more onto island soil, the air seemed to wrap around him like an old song. The breeze off the water carried hints of forgiveness, of reunion. He saw Joseph Momoa again, his father not as a dream, but as a living man, as flawed and human as anyone. And together they stood near the waters that had once held them both. Touching that ocean again was like placing his hand on a pulse he had thought might be gone. The storm inside him eased, not gone, but quieter, like a tide at low ebb. Co-reality, however, did not bend simply because he had come home. There were no crowns waiting, no cameras, surf, shop, boards, stacked like totems of other people's vacations. Bare were long days barefoot on heated concrete floors, carrying waxed boards to smiling tourists who would forget him as soon as they turned to the water. Every sail was a small victory, but also a reminder. Survival had to be earned one step at a time. His pay covered just enough food, a roof, and not always both. The apartment he came back to at night smelled of damp plaster and old salt, paint peeling like scabs, shadows stretching long. Sometimes there was no apartment at all. On those nights, he curled up on benches near the shoreline, with nothing but a thin blanket between him and the wind, listening to the waves he loved, and wondering if he would ever be more than a nameless figure in the dark. Hunger tugged at his ribs, fatigue seeped into his bones. Yet he did not fold. Tint, that old fire, sparked in Honolulu and fanned in Iowa's lonely fields, refused to dim. There was no clear map, no guarantee, only a deep, stubborn sense that he was meant to do more than stack surfboards and count tips. He kept moving, kept showing up, kept cracking jokes with coworkers and strangers as if laughter itself could keep despair at bay. Kane. Then, on a wet afternoon in 1999, when the sky hung low and gray, destiny appeared in an unexpected form. A Japanese designer, Takeo Kikuchi, watched him work. Kid. The stranger saw not just a tall, sun-browned kid, but a presence, a way of holding himself, of moving, that spoke of storms weathered and survived. He approached Jason with an offer to step in front of a camera, not as a background blur, but as the point of focus. Jason's first instinct was to laugh it off. He had no training, no practiced smolder, no polished model's walk. What he did have was honesty written into the lines of his body, a history of being cold, hungry, uncertain. That honesty is what people saw. Within months, his look, the eyes that carried both softness and danger, the easy grin that covered old hurt, began to attract real attention. That same year, he was crowned Model of the Year in Hawaii. To outsiders, it seemed like an entry ticket into glamour. To him, it was a whisper in his ear. You are not invisible. It was proof that the world, which had once felt indifferent to his existence, was finally turning its gaze toward him. Yet that moment was just a ripple on the surface of a far more demanding ocean. Modeling opened a door, but what lay beyond required more than a strong jawline and broad shoulders. It demanded discipline, patience, resilience. Comment 46. Or write a message of love for Jason Momoa, to honor them, from over 1,000 hopefuls. He was chosen for Baywatch Hawaii, stepping into the role of Jason Ione. It wasn't merely a job. It was the first time he stood on a set with a story to help tell. 40 episodes and a television film later, the sand beneath his feet had become more than scenery. Each day on that beach set was a test. Learn your marks, remember your lines, hit the emotion, respect the crew. The boy who had once felt exiled from the sea, now ran along its edge under bright lights. His every movement captured and preserved. Camera, where the camera would be, how to let it see what he wanted it to see. Strength, vulnerability, humor, rage. Along the way, certain people took notice, not of the hype, but of the work. Among them, Simone McKinnon, a co-star with years more experience, became a quiet guide. She encouraged him to sharpen his instincts, to trust that the same raw energy that drove him through childhood could be shaped into something precise, something powerful. Cue slipped. He overacted. He missed cues. Then he adjusted. Over and over, like a wave learning the shape of a shore. Roles followed North Shore. Johnson Family Vacations, signs that the industry was beginning to remember his name. The real crucible arrived with Stargate Atlantis. From 2005 to 2009, as Ronan Dex, he carried dreadlocks heavy enough to strain his neck, trudged through frigid water, and weathered long, punishing days filled with stunts that left his muscles screaming. Every bruise, every scraped knuckle, every late night was another layer built on top of years spent feeding on determination instead of certainty. There were times he slept little, ate less, and wondered if the path would ever lead to anything lasting. But he didn't stop. Teen, the boy who had slept on benches in Hawaii, the teen who'd felt lost in Iowa. Set, the young man who'd chased silence in Tibet. All of them converged in the man now battling imaginary enemies with real sweat. With each character, he wasn't just pretending, he was pouring his history into the frame. The abandonment, the hunger, the nights of doubt, the flashes of joy was all there if you knew how to look. And somewhere along that road, something shifted. Ceased to be just a kid trying to catch up and became a force directors sought out for his ferocity, his presence, quote, his ability to stand in front of a lens and make people believe that he had fought every war his characters claimed. By the end of that decade, he wasn't chasing the vague idea of destiny anymore. He was meeting it head-on, like a storm that had finally realized it was not at the mercy of the sky, but part of it. Comment 46, or write a message of love for Jason Momoa to honor them. Jason Momoa rose from that first decade of work, carrying the grit of someone who had fought every step for a place the world once told him he didn't deserve. Yet fame, even in its brightest form, is not a gentle tide. When 2010 arrived, bringing with it the thundering opportunity to shape his own creative world, Jason stood not as an uncertain newcomer, but as a man ready to carve space with his bare hands. He founded Pride of Gypsies, not simply a production company, but a declaration. He would no longer wait for permission, nor rely on a system that had once overlooked him. This new chapter was not built on ego-wit, was built on survival, on the hunger that had defined his earliest years. It was a structure grounded in collaboration, storytelling, and the belief that real artistry grows from community rather than competition. A year later, the role that would permanently shift the gravity of his life arrived. Game of Thrones had already begun reshaping television when he walked into an audition room and unleashed a haka so raw, so thunderous, that it stunned the decision-makers into absolute silence. In that moment, the years of homelessness, the aching nights in Iowa, the hunger, the surf shop floors, the paint-scented Paris rooms, the Tibetan snow, the long rides, every bruise from Stargate, all of it fused into a single explosive offering. When he became Khal Drogo, he didn't just play a warrior. He resurrected one from the marrow of his own lived experience. Overnight, his anonymity dissolved. Crowds roared his name. Magazines plastered his image on glossy covers. Around the world, people watched him with a mix of awe, fear, and admiration, believing that strength was his entire story. But fame carries sharp edges. As Drogo's arc ended and the show thundered forward without him, the momentum that had seemed unstoppable abruptly slowed. Hollywood, cold and calculating, placed him in a strange limbo. Casting directors whispered that he was too intense, too large, too wild. Opportunities slipped away. The industry shelves, where actors wait for roles, can be colder than any winter. For Jason, this was the hardest truth. The world he had dreamed of entering now acted as if his presence was too much for it. Comment 46, or write a message of love for Jason Momoa to honor them. Between 2012 and 2014, the glitter faded. The applause became a memory rather than an echo. Money dwindled. The same man who had commanded legions on screen now struggled to pay bills. He later revealed that he had to borrow to feed his family, to keep lights glowing in his home, to create even a small sense of stability for the people who depended on him. In the silence of late nights, with only the hum of a refrigerator for company, he faced the question that haunts all dreamers. What if the world has already decided your best days are behind you? Yet even in that darkness, he continued to write, to dream, to build. In 2014, he did what he had always done when cornered by silence. He created. Road to Paloma became his rebellion against invisibility. Directed, produced, wrote, and starred in it, crafting a story of freedom and justice that echoed his own longing for space in a world determined to shrink him. The film didn't bring wealth, didn't dominate box offices, but it healed him. In building something from nothing, he rediscovered the truth he had carried since boyhood. The world cannot take your voice if you refuse to stop speaking. Then came the wave, massive and life-altering. In 2016, the call from DC arrived. Aquaman, a symbol of everything he had once lost and everything he still hoped to protect. The irony struck him deeply. The ocean he had been separated from as a child now demanded he embody it on the global stage. Justice League, in 2017, faltered critically, bruising egos and draining studio confidence. But Jason refused to bow. He trained harder, fought harder, prepared longer. Every hour in freezing water tanks, every muscle trembling from strain. Every sleepless flight became an oath to the boy he once was. The one who had longed for the sea and feared he might never find his place in the world. When Aquaman premiered in 2018, the tide broke open. Over $1 billion at the global box office. A record-shattering ascent no one expected but everyone felt. Jason's performance, raw and magnetic, transformed him into a cultural titan. At the premiere, he performed the Maui Haka with his cast-on eruption of heritage, gratitude, and warrior spirit. Cameras flashed, fans screamed. Yet through it all, he remained grounded, still hearing the whisper of waves from childhood. That same year, he was named the most handsome man in the world. To the public, it was confirmation. To him, it was simply a brief crown he wore lightly. But beneath the noise, he carried exhaustion and bruises that cameras never saw. Comment 46, or write a message of love for Jason Momoa to honor them. Fame, he learned, creates its own kind of solitude. Applause does not mend the soul. Spotlights do not soften loss. And the louder the world praised him, the more piercing the quiet behind closed doors became. Fame doesn't heal, he once admitted. It only makes the silence louder. Yet he continued anyway because he had learned long ago that storms do not pass by waiting. They pass by pushing through them. During these years of rising global success, his personal life carried its own gentle, growing light. For this chapter was not only about a man carving himself into legend, it was also about a man reshaping his heart. Simone Jade McKinnon had once guided him through early Hollywood, teaching him patience, helping him discover a discipline he didn't know he possessed. Her influence lingered not as longing, but as gratitude, quiet flame from the early days of struggle. Comment 47 or Right Rip Simone Jade. McKinnon, to honor them, then came the love that would define 16 years of his life. Lisa Bonet, she entered his world like a soft hymn, carried on evening wind. Same woman he once watched on a glowing TV screen as a child, and whispered that he would someday marry. When they finally met in New York, the universe seemed to exhale. Their connection formed instantly deep, resonant, almost mythic. Sisa was calm, a presence of stillness. Jason was a storm, full of restless fire. Together, they formed a sanctuary in Topanga Canyon. Quote, raising Lola and Nakoe Wolf in a home filled with barefoot mornings, cedar-scented breezes, and laughter drifting through open windows. He became not only a father to his two youngest children, but also a loving figure to Zoe Kravitz, honoring the family Lisa already carried with her. Their home was a landscape of open hearts, of shared meals and warm light, of creativity and belonging. Tiff. For years, they lived in a rhythm that felt untouchable. No paparazzi glare. No Hollywood pressure, just the heartbeat of a family that believed they had found forever. In 2017, after more than a decade together, they married beneath ancient oaks, quiet, intimate, sacred. It felt like the culmination of a promise first spoken in childhood. But even sacred stories encounter storms. Fame, relentless and demanding, began tugging at the seams of their shared life. Jason's schedule expanded with Aquaman's success. Lisa sought stillness while he was pulled toward global stages. Small cracks grew slowly, quietly, like shadows at dusk. By 2020, the pandemic forced the world to pause, but it also forced them to see the distances that had formed between them. They still loved each other fiercely, but in different directions now, shaped by the lives they led and the dreams they chased. In 2022, they released a joint statement of remarkable grace. We free each other to be who we are becoming. No anger, no bitterness, only dignity. Even after the divorce finalized in 2023, their family endured redefined, but not shattered. Key surfed with Lola, built motorcycles with Nook, shared dinners with So, and maintained deep respect for Lisa. A modern family sculpted not by vows, but by kindness. Comment 56 or Right Rip Lisa Bonet to honor them. Yet even as love shifted form, grief and danger continued circling his journey. On a November night in 2008, long before Aquaman and global fame, he was attacked in a cafe by a man armed with broken glass. The shard tore across his face, missing his eye by less than a centimeter. 140 stitches followed. Pain surged. Reality blurred. But he survived. He learned something profound. Life is fragile, but resolve is stronger. Years later came the injuries on the Aquaman sequel: torn muscles, damaged eyes, a herniated disc. His refusal to use stunt doubles pushed him beyond human limits. Yet, he never broke. Then came 2022, a head-on collision with a motorcyclist. Metal clashed, glass shattered, but once again he rose from the wreckage unbroken, shaken but alive. Comment 42 or write a message of strength for Jason Momoa to honor them. Jason Momoa emerged from the wreckage of that 2022 collision with lungs burning, hands trembling, the world tilting beneath his feet. Sudden violence of metal and motion had shaken something deep inside him, an echo of every bruise, every scar, every night from childhood when fear pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. Yet standing on the sunstruck asphalt, calling for help, watching smoke curl into the sky, he knew one immutable truth: survival was not an accident. Quote, "It was a skill he had spent his entire life refining. The crash left him shaken, but it also carved out a strange, unexpected clarity. In the aftermath, as paramedics tended to the injured motorcyclist and officers asked questions he scarcely heard, flashes of memory surged through him like lightning across a dark sea: his father's distant voice, his mother's arms, nights under Hawaiian stars, ache, the hollow ache of broken love, the exhaustion of endless film sets, the joy of his children, the weight of all he had endured. Ka realized then that every fracture he had survived, physical or emotional, had pushed him toward a deeper understanding of what it means to be alive. When the world later learned he had walked away uninjured, many called it luck, kayat. But Jason felt something different. Felt gratitude, not for escaping harm, but for all that life still offered him, to hold, to protect, to love. State. It was a moment that reminded him that strength is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to keep walking while still shaking. Comment 46, or write a message of strength for Jason Momoa, to honor them. Long before these modern trials, before Aquaman, before global fame, before the quiet heartbreaks, there had been a night in 2008 that nearly altered the entire course of his life. A night in a small Hollywood cafe where laughter, warm lights, and casual conversation disguised a danger waiting in the corners. Among friends, relaxed but tired. He had been unwinding after long hours when a stranger's drunken rage rippled unexpectedly through the air. Voices sharpened. Chairs scraped. The atmosphere tightened, as if every sound held its breath. Jason did not rise to fight. He rose to calm. A gentle hand. A firm voice. A plea to let tempers settle. But chaos rarely obeys kindness. The attacker lunged with a broken glass shard, and in a flash of violent movement, a deep cut tore across Jason's face. The world blurred. Light fractured. Blood warmed his cheek. Friends shouted. By the time they reached the hospital, he was fading in and out, his heartbeat thudding through the sterile white world around him. 140 stitches. A surgeon's hands working with painful precision. Hours under bright lamps. And beneath it all, a strange calm anchored him. He understood pain. He had learned to walk with it since childhood. The scar became part of him. A mark not of tragedy, but of survival. When the attacker received a 5-year sentence, Jason did not shout for vengeance, did not publicly shame the man. He simply moved forward, carrying a reminder that life can shift in a single breath. Death. This was not the wound that defined him. It was the wound that taught him how much he could withstand. Comment 29, or write a message of solidarity for Jason Momoa, to honor them. Yet, even as he faced violence and uncertainty, it was through work that he reclaimed his strength. The years leading into Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom were filled not with ease but with physical war-shoulder tears, eye injuries during stunts, a herniated disc, countless bruises hidden beneath costumes that millions would later admire. His refusal to rely on stunt doubles came from a place deeper than pride. It came from authenticity and insistence that when his characters fought for survival, he would earn every frame. There were nights when pain kept him awake, when every shift of his body felt like a warning, when even his breath trembled. But he pressed on. Cuss, the boy who had once slept on benches in Hawaii, had promised himself he would never quit heaven when the cost was steep. Every punch, every dive, every crash into cold water was a tribute not to fame but to discipline, to the countless storms he had already endured. Comment 42, or write a message of respect for Jason Momoa to honor them, as his body healed and his career continued to rise. Another part of his life began quietly rewriting itself, in the shadow of heartbreak, when the home he had built with Lisa Bonet had dissolved into separate paths. Loneliness echoed in the halls of his success. He had known storms before, but this one was uniquely silent. Loss without blame. Distance without anger. A chapter ending not in fire, but in the dimming of light. And then, unexpectedly, someone returned from the edges of his past. Adria Arjona. They had met during the filming of Sweet Girl, in 2021, colleagues moving in parallel, respectful of each other's craft, but caught in the complexities of their own lives. Years passed. Space healed wounds. Time softened sharp edges. Then, in early 2024, a gentle re-entry, chance encounter in Los Angeles, where their eyes met with a quiet recognition that neither could ignore in her presence. There was no performance, no pressure to outrun pain. She brought a calm glow, grounding yet luminous, where Jason moved like a tide shifting between intensity and stillness. Adria carried the warmth of sunrise, soft, steady, patient. They found comfort in small things, motorcycles whispering along coastal roads in early morning fog, slow meals under the hush of dim lights, quiet jokes shared during long hikes, laughter spilling gently into spaces untouched by the world's noise. By May 2024, Jason acknowledged to the world that his heart had found company once more. And in February 2025, walking hand in hand with Adria at the SNL 50 homecoming concert, carried not the fire of passion alone, but the serenity of a man who had learned to love again without fear. This was not the reckless romance of youth, nor the depruded devotion of his years with Lisa. This was a mature love, soft, grounding, earned through hardship and healing. Comment 31, or write a blessing for Jason Momoa and Adria Arjona to honor them, even as love returned. Another connection lingered quietly in the deepest waters of his soul, one tied not by romance, but by brotherhood, by purpose, by shared devotion to the sea. Paul Walker. Paths crossed through charity work, through ocean conservation, through an instinctive understanding of what it meant to respect nature. Paul's Reach Out Worldwide initiative after the Haiti earthquake brought them closer, revealing parallel spirits shaped by salt water, compassion, and the thrill of movement, motorcycles driving, the call of wind against skin. Paul awakened something in Jason that had nothing to do with fame. A reminder that service is the true measure of a man. That protecting the world around you is as vital as protecting those you love. Then came that devastating day, November 30th, 2013. Paul Walker's life ended in a fiery crash in Santa Clarita, at just 40 years old. When news reached Jason, he did not offer a public spectacle of grief. Instead, he stood silently on a Hawaiian beach for hours, staring at the horizon, letting waves break against his feet. And in that silence, tears came not for a celebrity lost, but for a brother of the ocean. His tribute was quiet, an image of the sea with the words, "Rest easy, brother of the waves." But his real mourning lived in action. He redoubled his efforts in conservation, in marine protection, in teaching children to love the ocean Paul had revered. He supported Reach Out worldwide. He built the Mananalu water movement. He fought plastic waste with renewed fire. Every wave he touched felt like a conversation with Paul, like a message carried on currents only the heart can hear. Komen 40, or Right Rip Paul Walker, to honor them. Now, at 46, Jason lives a life intertwined with adventure, art, and intention. His possessions reflect not vanity, but values. Harley Davidsons lined beside BMW R9Ts, a vintage 1955. Pink Cadillac, affectionately named Bernadette. Earth Roamer expedition vehicles, ready to chase horizons. Boats, boards, climbing gear, tools of a life lived close to nature. His investments mirror his passions. From craft beer collaborations with Guinness, to sustainable fashion and eco-driven products. His wealth, around $10 million, is modest compared to Hollywood giants. But his richness is measured differently, in meaning, in impact, in experience. His homes tell the same story. A California estate filled with carved wood, plants, warmth, private Hawaiian refuge on the North Shore, where lava rock meets surf, and he can return, barefoot, to the ocean that raised him. There, with his children, Lola, 18, and Nakawolf, 17, he reconnects with the pulse of life that has always guided him. Death. They surf at dawn, clean beaches, laugh over simple meals, explore trails where pine and salt dance together in the breeze. See? For them, he is not Khal Drogo. He is a father teaching them to live with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Comment 18, or write A. The life Jason Momoa carries today is not a straight ascent into stardom, but a weaving of shadows and sunlight, of wounds endured and miracles witnessed. Each morning he wakes with the understanding that survival is a practice, not a guarantee. His scars, and his face, his shoulders, his back tell stories that exist beneath the surface of fame, stories that shape the way he moves through the world. His body, worn yet powerful, reveals the truth of a man who has spent a lifetime pouring heart, bone, and breath into everything he loves. In the quiet of dawn, before the engines of the world begin their hum. He often sits barefoot on a deck, listening to the sea breathe. On some mornings, he meditates. On others, he lets the day take him wherever it chooses. Surfboard under his arm, hair damp from salt, heart open to the possibility of joy. He has learned to pause, to breathe, to allow silence to be a friend instead of an enemy. It is a practice born from years of chaos, heartbreak, and healing. But even in moments of stillness, the echoes of old storms linger. The scar across his eyebrow earned, in that violent night in 2008, ever fully fades. Tear in his shoulder from the Aquaman sequel reminds him of the price of dedication. The memory of the motorcyclist lying shaken after the head-on collision in Los Angeles returns at unexpected moments, reminding him that life can pivot in half a heartbeat. Yet these shadows do not imprison Jim. Instead, they illuminate the depth of his resilience, shaping the man he continues to become. Comment 46 or write a message of respect for Jason Momoa to honor them. There are days when he moves through his California home slowly, too, running his hands along carved wooden furniture, appreciating the craftsmanship, the warmth, the artistry. The light falls softly across the plants he nurtures, the paintings he collected from travels, the vintage instruments resting in corners. Every object in his home carries meaning. Nothing is chosen for excess, everything is chosen for spirit. Bernadetta, 1955. Pink Cadillacs. It's in his garage like a time capsule of personality and flair. Earthroamer vehicles stand ready for roads less traveled. Reminders that the world is still wide and the horizon always inviting. Rows of motorcycle helmets line the walls, each one representing a journey, a ride, a memory. Boards are stacked near the entrance, ready for the ocean. Tools, leather straps, handmade knives, everything fits the life of a man who values craft over luxury. His Hawaii retreat offers an even deeper connection to soul. There, bare feet on volcanic rock, he feels closer to the boy he once was, the boy who missed the ocean while freezing in Iowa snow. 2. Climbed trees as if chasing forgotten cliffs. Kowode, who lay awake, imagining the rhythm of waves he could no longer hear. When he steps into Hawaiian waters now, he feels a homecoming in every ripple. These two worlds, California's creativity and Hawaii's roots, are the beating centers of his adulthood. Comment 46, or write a message of gratitude for Jason Momoa to honor them. Family is the axis of his spirit. Lola Iolani, with her quiet brilliance and artistic curiosity, mirrors her mother's serenity but carries her father's fire. She moves through life with the confidence of someone who has seen the world's beauty and its harshness, yet still believes in goodness. Scaula asks questions that pierce to the heart of things, questions about purpose, legacy, the environment, the way people treat one another. Questions he answers with honesty. The same honesty he wished the world had given him as a child. Nakoa Wolf, fierce yet gentle, carries a name that holds wind, darkness, and strength. Key moves with a spark that reminds Jason of himself at that age, restless, energetic, eager to experience the world without holding back. But unlike Jason's lonely childhood, Nako Wolf grows with a foundation of support, surrounded by creativity, love, and possibility. His recent casting in Dune Part 3 fills Jason with a pride deeper than any premiere applause. Watching his son step behind the camera lights feels like witnessing the next wave in an unbroken lineage of storytellers. Their home is filled with laughter, messy, loud, honest, morning smoothies, playful arguments, shared workouts, nights curled around campfires on the property as coyotes sing in the distance. Teaches them archery. They teach him TikTok dances. Kotade he shares Hawaiian chants. They share playlists. The family bond feels like a tapestry woven over years of love, loss, adventure, and growth. Comment 18. Or write a message of love for Lola and Nako Evolve to honor them into this world of nature, creativity, and family. Walks Adria Arjunat as an outsider, but as someone whose presence eases the weight of every old burden. Her laughter softens the sting of past sorrows. Her composure balances the intensity that has defined his entire life. She stands with him, not in front or behind, but beside, a testament that healing does not always roar in like a storm. Sometimes it arrives like morning light sliding through curtains, gentle and warm. There are nights when they sit on the balcony under strings of soft lights, sharing stories, sipping wine, listening to guitars hum in the distance. They understand each other without needing to explain every bruise or scar. Two artists, two wanderers, two souls who lived long roads before finding this quiet point of convergence. Their connection is neither rushed nor forced. It is a natural unfolding, a recognition of the resilience they both carry. When they walk red carpets together, the world sees glamour, but what Jason feels is something simpler, calm. A partner who anchors him, who doesn't demand a performance, who holds space for the man behind the warrior image. After losing the sanctuary he built with Lisa, after weathering years of emotional complexity, learning to trust again took courage. And in Adria, he found not just companionship, but renewal. Comment 31. Or write a blessing for Jason Momoa and Adria Arjona to honor them. And yet, through all seasons of love and loss, one bond remains carved into his heart with the permanence of tide against stone. Paul Walker. Their friendship was quiet, but profounder brotherhood shaped by compassion, adventure, and the ocean's call. Paul had a way of looking at the world that reminded Jason of who he wanted to be: humble, grounded, committed to service beyond the spotlight. Their conversations were rarely about fame, and almost always about helping others, about wildlife preservation, about how to make the earth breathe easier. When Paul passed in 2013, the tragedy split something inside Jason. The ocean became his chapel of mourning, the waves the only voice that made sense of the loss. Even now, when he dives into deep blue currents or rides glassy swells, he feels Paul's spirit woven into the water. The grief transformed into a lifelong mission, protecting the sea, rescuing marine creatures, educating others about conservation. His way of keeping Paul's legacy alive, of honoring a life cut short but not silenced. When he holds a Mananalu aluminum bottle, when he speaks publicly about plastic pollution, when he collaborates with activists, he carries Paul with him in every gesture. Their brotherhood lives in every ripple of water touched by intention. Comment 40, or write Rip Paul Walker to honor them. Beyond activism, Jason channels his energy into art. Music remains a sanctuary where emotion becomes vibration, where unspoken thoughts find melody. Pete plays guitar, drums, ukulele, bass. Music nights in his home can last for hours, him strumming quiet chords, friends joining in, laughter drifting through open windows. Kit is in these moments that the world feels small, manageable. filled with meaning, he also pours his passion into fashion, craftsmanship, and design. The pieces he creates, jackets, accessories, are functional art, built with durability and soul. His beer, brewed with Guinness, carries a touch of his personality in its flavor, a blend of boldness and comfort. His collaborations emphasize sustainability, storytelling, pride, and the belief that even everyday objects can reflect deeper purpose. His philanthropic efforts continue to expand, touching disaster relief, children's education, play, and environmental preservation. He never performs generosity for cameras. Instead, he moves quietly, investing time, resources, and heart into causes that mirror his deepest convictions. Yet despite the scale of his influence, he remains, at his core, a humble presence, someone who prefers campfires to red carpets, motorcycles to limousines, and the whisper of waves to the roar of applause. Comment 46 or write, "Rip Jason Momoa," to honor them.